Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I'll be showing you how you can draft your own basic bodice. So without further ado, let's get straight into the video. The first thing I'm going to do would be to mark 1 inch at the top. And that would be my starting point. And I'm going to connect the dots with a straight line. So this is my shoulder line. So we are basically starting with the vertical measurement, and the next measurement will be the bust point. So my bust point is right here. I'm also going to connect the dots with a straight line. And this is my bust point. The next vertical measurement would be my underbust. So from my shoulder to my underbust. I'll mark the dot and I'm also going to connect that with a straight line. So here is my underbust. The next vertical measurement will be from my shoulder to the waistline. So mine is 16.5. I'm just going to connect that with a straight line as well. And the last measurement would be my hip measurement, or the hip line. I would also mark that and I'll connect that with a straight line. And this is my hip line. So the next thing for us to do would be to determine the neckline for this pattern. So I'll be using 3 inches as my neck width and also 3 inches as my neck depth. And I'm just going to connect this with my French curve. So this is the front neckline. The next measurement would be my shoulder measurement. My shoulder measurement is 14 inches and I'm going to divide that by 2, which gives me 7. And then at that 7 mark, I'm going to come down by 1 inch to mark my shoulder slope. So I'll connect that to the neckline I drew earlier. And that is my shoulder slope. The next thing for us to determine will be my armhole. My armhole is 7.5. You can also determine your armhole by dividing your bust circumference by 6 and then add 1.5. So mine is 7.5. I would extend that by drawing a straight line, and I would also extend the upper chest line. So this is my upper chest line. We are done with all of the vertical measurements. We are going to move on to all of the horizontal measurements. My bust circumference is 34 inches divided by 4. I'm going to mark that down. And I would also mark the same measurement on my upper chest line. So your bust circumference will be marked on your bust point as well as on your upper chest line. My underbust measurement is 7.5 and my waistline is also 7.5. So I'll mark the dots and I would also mark the one for my hip measurement. My hip measurement is 10.5 and I'm going to connect all of these dots. But before doing that, we need to determine our armhole. So what I'm going to do is to determine the midpoint of this line where we had the armhole measurements. So mine is 3.75. I will place that right back and then I'm going to mark the midpoint. At that midpoint, I'm going to come in by 3/4 of an inch. And then I'll connect this to this point right there and also to my measurement. So I'm going to connect all of the dots together. And this is my front armhole. So I'm going to also mark the back armhole right in front of it, just like this. So this is the back armhole. The back armhole comes before the front armhole. The next thing would be to connect all of the dots together. I'm just going to connect all of this together with a straight line. The next thing would be to determine our waist dots. And to determine the waist dart, we need the bust span. The bust span is the distance between one bust apex to another bust apex divided by 2. So mine is 3.5. I will mark that down from my bust point to my hip line. So I'll mark 3.5 from my bust point all the way to my hip line. So I'm going to connect all of these dots with a straight line. So the next thing would be to come down by 1 inch at the bust point. And I would also go up by 2 inches at the hip line, just like this. And on the waistline, I'm going to mark 1/2 inch on both sides. And then I'll connect all of the dots together. I'll show you how to do this now. Another dart that we need to determine would be the bust dart. And this is the midpoint between the upper chest line and the under bust. So for me, I had 5.5. And the midpoint will be 2.75. So I'll place that back and I'll mark 2.75 at the middle. The next thing would be to draw a line from the bust apex to meet the midpoint. And then I would need to come down 1 inch at the bust apex. And I'll mark 1/2 inch on both sides as my darts. And I'll connect these dots together just like this. And we are basically done with the front pattern. The only thing left for us to do would be to determine the back neckline. Remember, we determined the back armhole, so we also need the back neckline, so we are able to trace out the back piece or the back pattern. So for the back neckline, I want 1.5 as my back neck depth. So I'll mark that down and I'm going to use my French curve to trace that out. And we are basically done with the pattern. So here is the back neckline and here is the back armhole. The next thing would be to cut out the neckline and the armhole as well as the pattern itself. So here is the front pattern. I'm going to show you how to cut out the neckline and the armhole for the front piece. So I have the back neckline cut out from the front neckline as well as the back armhole also cut out from the front pattern. And here is the front pattern itself. So I have the back pattern traced out The first thing we are going to do would be to mark our chest measurement or the upper chest line, which is 7.5. I'll connect that with a straight line. And the next thing will be to determine my bust point. I'll connect the dot and I'll also mark a straight line. So here is my upper chest line and here is my bust point. So the next vertical measurement will be my underbust measurement. I'll connect the dot with a straight line and that will be my underbust. And the next measurement would be my waistline, which is right here. And the last vertical measurement would be my hip line, which is already drawn out. So the next thing for us to do would be to determine the waist dart. And that's the only dart we are going to use for this back piece. And I'm going to use the same 3.5 all the way from my upper chest line to my hip line. So 3.5 on my waistline and lastly 3.5 on my hip line. And I'm going to connect all of the dots with a straight line. The next thing for us to do would be to come up by 2 inches at the hip line, which I marked already. And I'm also going to come down by 1/2 inch at the upper chest line, which I marked already. And I'm going to mark 1/2 inch on both sides of the waistline. And I'll connect all of the dots together. And we are basically done with the back pattern. Please don't forget to include 2 inches as your zipper allowance while drafting your back pattern. And by the time we are done connecting all of these dots, we are done. Thank you so much for waiting till the end of this video. If this video was helpful, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe so you don't get to miss any of my videos. Thank you so much and bye.